You're listening to Our Daily Show with CJ Nicola on RiverBender.com.
It is a Snowmageddon Monday out there. All of us snowed in, but our daily show continues with a great conversation now with the CEO of Matson Money. Mark Matson joins us via Zoom. How are you doing on this Monday morning, sir?
I'm doing great, getting the year started with some energy and passion here. Start out with your show.
And thank you so much for doing that. And it seems like a lot of people are getting energized about maybe the potential of better financial security going forward. And right now, as it sits on the 6th day of the 25th, 2025, how are we feeling? How are you feeling personally about this year?
Well, I'm feeling great about this year, and I'm feeling great about the next 4 years, quite frankly. I think what we witnessed was nothing short of a miracle as Trump won the election. I really restored my faith in America, our values, our freedoms, our morals, our ethics. I think a lot of folks in the financial industry like myself are very positive, feeling great that this country can really make a good turnaround after the last 4 years of devastation.
Well, and on top of that, Mark, President Trump has outlined a plan to stabilize prices, restore purchasing power. And from your perspective, how do these policies align with the financial strategies that you advocate for and talk about all the time?
Well, one of the things we always talk about is our equities. Equities are the greatest wealth creation tool known to mankind. Historically, large stocks have averaged about 10% per year, so your money doubles in every 7.2 years. Small stocks have been in the ballpark of 12%, small value stocks in the ballpark of 14%. So historically, equities, owning stocks, not only in the United States, but also globally, is one of the ways that people can fulfill their American dream. And Trump is very pro equities, very pro free markets. Look, it's not just what he's getting ready to do. For example, hold on to the tax cuts that most people got in 2017. You have to admit what he's going to prevent. You had proposals for tax rates to go away, the tax benefits. You had people wanting to do away with the state tax benefits. You wanted people to, Harris wanted to take taxes, capital gains taxes, make them ordinary taxes. It was even the idea of floating a wealth tax on capital gains you hadn't even made yet was floated. This would have been devastation for the economy. Inflation would have continued to spiral out of control. Jobs would have been lost. So we really dodged a bullet on this one.
Well, and on top of that too, Mark, and you know a lot more about this than I do, but just in my perspective and my demographic and my generation, it seems like that American dream, quote unquote, is just becoming less and less obtainable for younger people, or our perception at least, where we're going, man, we aren't going to be like our grandparents. How can you see some of these policies starting to maybe energize my group of young Americans that are ready to tackle that dream?
Yeah, and I want to just say for all the young people out there, look, the American dream is still attainable. It's still real. With hard work and determination, it's out there. We have more entrepreneurs than ever in the United States of America. Almost half of everyone's employed by a small business, not a large Fortune 500 company. So there are a lot of opportunities. Look, a couple things to remember. When people think about the American dream, here's the kind of things they want. They usually want a family. They want to have a secure job. They want to be able to save for retirement. They want home ownership. And all of those things were getting harder. Inflation took off like crazy. I've been asked, well, was inflation transitory? Inflation is never transitory, meaning it's only temporary, because it's permanent. Once it's in there, it doesn't go back down. So these prices are up 30, 40, 50% in some areas over the last 4 years. That has to come down. Interest rates for mortgages has to come down. More high-paying jobs where people can work to create enough wealth and prosperity for their dreams. People have to start investing again. A lot of people were taking money out of their 401ks just to live off of. And now we have to start getting back to hard work, saving 10 to 15% of your money every year, investing in equities long-term for young people, having an emergency fund. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that to happen in the future.
Well, you spoke on inflation, and that's something that really has just hit every family. You know, walk the grocery aisle, and if you feel comfortable paying $8 for cereal, God love you. I can't personally. And, Mark, with that, Donald Trump's approach to tackling inflation, how do you see this benefiting American investors and families that are looking to maybe preserve their wealth or maybe even establish it too?
Yeah, inflation is a real killer.
Yeah.
It's an economic killer. Look, what most people don't understand is inflation is a form of taxation. And it's regressive, which means that the people that make the least amount of money get hit hardest by inflation. If you're making $10 million a year, you can only eat so many cheeseburgers, right? And maybe your property, your real estate, and your business might be going up in value. But if you're in the lower middle class or in poverty, these inflationary taxes on energy, on food, these are a form of taxation, and they need to be brought down. Dr. Art Laffer, who won the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Donald Trump, was on our academic board. And inflation is really, really simple. You have too much money chasing too few goods. So you have to reduce government spending. You have to let people have more of their own money to buy products and services. That means tax reductions. And you got to open up free markets, and you have to reduce the very, very high cost of natural gas, natural energy, because if you don't, those things drive everything. They don't just drive your car. They drive manufacturing of your cell phone and your glasses and your clothing. And energy affects everything, and those prices have got to come down to get inflation under control.
Well, and on top of that too, with the economy where it is and where inflation being at the pace it's at, there's also this talk that Donald Trump's had about maybe expanding career opportunities. We've had that national conversation. The visa argument was coming into play, but I wanted to ask about this emphasis on expanding career opportunities, because I think that goes hand in hand to maybe how an American can start tackling some of these rising costs and these gotcha bills, is what I call them. The ghost fees that are always there. How can families leverage these pathways to, prosperity and really just long-term financial support in terms of what the president's proposing, President-elect's proposing?
Yeah, when you look at some of his proposals, number one, he wants to keep the tax cuts of 2017. If it's a corporation and they're manufacturing goods in the United States, he wants to drop their income taxes to 15%. He wants to take 21 to 20% for normal corporations. He wants to give a $5,000 tax credit for children in the family. So there's a lot of very pro things. You're going to get to keep more of your money under this administration than you would have. That's very pro growth here for you. But I think the key thing here is mindset.
Okay.
The mindset. People always say, "What's the best investment?" I always say, "Well, your best investment is investing in yourself."
True.
And they say, "Well, how do I get started?" And I to many people's surprise, I say, "Start at the bottom." Look, if you don't have a lot of experience, if you don't have a lot of money, if you have a lot of debt from student, start at the bottom and work harder than the next guy. Work harder than the person next to you. Show up early. Work late. If you work for an entrepreneur, they're going to notice. They're going to see. They're going to give you more opportunities. They're going to give you raises. They're going to give you more training and education. And that is very much available in the United States and America. We have so much opportunities for someone who's willing to work hard, that has grit, that's willing to outwork the next person. And don't sit in your home in your basement on your computer. Go to the office so your boss can see your face. Do yourself a big favor. Don't ghost yourself and hide out at home. Get to work.
Well, and I wanted to follow up on that. I think that point is so vitally important for so many people, because I'm like the outlier in my generation. I feel like the old guy that's yelling at everybody saying, let's get up and let's go. How important is it for us to get the stick out, and all proper ways to say this, but quote unquote, let's get the stick out and let's get to work? Because I think a lot of this in my generation is this kind of woe is me mentality that's not getting us anywhere.
Brother, you just nailed it 100%. In the book that I just wrote called Experiencing the American Dream, I talk about mindsets and how critical they are. They're screens by the way that you see the world. And my grandfather, who got us out of the hills and hollers of West Virginia, but never got us out of poverty, he had a mindset about the world. Money's evil. Money's hard to get. He was a victim. He saw himself as a victim. He saw himself as entitled to money he didn't create. In this victim mentality is the absolute destroyer of your American dream. I call it a money demon. On the other hand, my father had this view of the world where if you add enough value to other people, if you serve other people, if you ask, what can I do to bring value to them instead of what can I get for free, then you have a whole different way of seeing the world, a way of freedom, a way of capitalism, of free markets, hard work, entrepreneurism, individuality versus entitlement and a victimhood. And those two different ways of seeing the world will, in a large capacity, determine whether or not you have your American dream or you become an American victim of entitlement and the liberal way of looking at the world. Look, liberals don't want success. They want people to fail, because if they fail, you got to stay committed to getting the government handouts.
Well, and you know, I'm just, you know, to follow up on that, I've given a couple of speeches around the region here too, and I just hope people are listening to me for my generation and listen to what you just had to say, because we have to grab the ball eventually and put it in our hands and let's start moving forward. And on top of that all too, I think that's why, and you've got a sense on this by talking to so many people and your finger on the pulse, but you know, it's not really, to me, for my generation, wasn't the policies of Donald Trump, it was the attitude for so many of my generation that kind of gravitated towards him. You know, and is that something that you're seeing too, was just maybe this, let's get back let's get back to working hard and going back to what we used to do?
Yeah, I heard recently they were talking about the two world leaders. They were talking about Hitler and they were talking about Churchill. Mm-hmm. And one thing was that Hitler had people believe that he could do anything. Churchill had people believing they could do anything. And I think under a Trump presidency, if you start to have a more optimistic outlook, if you start to look for those opportunities, the problem isn't unemployment. The problem is that people won't go to work. There's over 6 million jobs that are available, that are open, that people won't take. So, you know, we've been a little sheltered here in America. We've really had it well for a long time. And I think that makes people a little lazy, a little apathetic, setting back on their heels instead of going out and chasing it. But if you're willing to work hard and figure out what can you create value for other people, and the capitalistic system will create value for you if you're willing to create value for others. And it's an amazing thing. Capitalism is incredible. It's the greatest wealth creation tool the world has ever known. And as an American, you're entitled to it. You're entitled
It's
to
true.
freedom of speech,
It's true.
freedom of capital, freedom to start your own company. Look, you and I aren't having this conversation if we live in Russia right now. We're not having this conversation if we live in Cuba or Venezuela or Iran. There are great opportunities here in America.
Well, and you're right, Mark. And, you know, we have a couple of minutes left here. And it just goes back because people ask me all the time, they go, man, how did you get this show on the road? Because I did it. You know, it wasn't this big equation. You just did it. You know, I worked in radio and said, let's try this. And no matter what, we just got to keep trying. We got to put the feet down and we got to work. And now with that being said, how do President Trump's overall economic policies, I know that there's, you know, talks of tariff. What does that actually mean? How do they how do these policies, this economic vision, how does it resonate with just your personal philosophy, you know, throughout this whole process?
You know, there's never, even in marriage, there's never a perfect fit. You always have to have conversations about things you have to work through. So I love President's policies overall. Not a huge fan of tariffs. Mm-hmm. He's suggesting a 20% tariff on everybody, a 60% tariff on China. I talked to Dr. Art Laffer just the other day. He said, look, you know, the tariffs, one thing about Trump, and he definitely has this, I'm not great at negotiation. I'm pretty bad at it, but he's great at it. And what he does is he uses those tariffs as a negotiating tool, as a chip, a negotiation chip. And so I'm not really worried about the tariffs so much. I'm not worried about a trade war. I'm worried about real war. I'm worried about Iran and Israel. I'm worried about Russia and Ukraine. And that's a key thing for the global economy to heal and recover, is for Trump to help end those wars. That's going to be a key for inflation. That's going to be a key for stability and for growth for our country and other countries. And he's building a coalition, not just of the United States, but all these other foreign leaders. And I think he'll do a great job at it, much better than Biden.
Before I let you go, Mark, and I really appreciate your time this Monday morning, I wanted to ask you, finally, before I let you go, talking just a little bit about everything here today. And what I think such a big component is, not everything is going to be given to us as an American citizen. Just because we voted for X, Y, or Z doesn't mean X, Y, or Z is going to be giving us the world. There's got to be a working component to it. If Trump's policies are implemented and the American, everyday American, like myself or anybody else, is starting to put that work in, how does your vision of the American dream currently shift once you start seeing these things in action?
Yeah, I think it just, my view of it doesn't shift, because my view of it is that the American dream is not just having money or materialism. It's having a positive outlook. It's creating wealth for others. It's freedom. It's independence. It's family. And I think it's freedom of speech and freedom of religion. It's freedom of the press. And I think you're going to see much more freedom. And we had a lot of restrictions under President Biden. And I think that was going to get worse. My hope for this country and the American dream, and for people striving for it, this is a great time to be an American.
Mark, all I know is that it snowed 10 inches here in the St. Louis area, and I was struggling to get into work today. I had to look like Tony Soprano walking through the woods, you know? But you gave me the energy, man, to fire me up. I hope to talk with you again soon. Thank you so much for your time, and the best Monday you can have.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care of yourself out there in that snow. Thanks, brother.
We'll talk again soon. Mark Matson, the CEO of Matson Money. More daily show right around the bend after a quick break in the heart of the 618.